Dagger, the Marvel MCU adjacent TV show, spoiler-free review. So this is a show that I absolutely loved. I might spoil the MCU leading up to, but not including any of this show. Just be forewarned, but this is a review for people who have not yet watched any of this show to try to figure out if they want to watch it. It's 20 episodes, it's on Disney Plus. If you already have Disney Plus, it's just an investment of time. I hope this can help determine. The show is rated 14 plus, and so will this video be. Let's start with the incredible acting. I'm not familiar with the main cast from much of anything else. Aubrey Joseph is stunning. Olivia Holt is phenomenal. I really haven't seen anything that makes sense to criticize about the performance of either of them. I've seen some people say that they think the two actors are too pretty, which, I appreciate, I'm personally a big fan of when they try to give roles to people who are not conventionally attractive. And, one can appreciate this is not supposed to be about, I've seen some people say this has like CW casting, and this is not a CW show. This is not supposed to be this kind of, oh, look at these relatable teenagers. Aren't they attractive? Can't you recognize their problems? No, this is very much supposed to be a darker thing. And as such, I can appreciate that the casting might seem somewhat incongruous there, but they're so talented, and it's not really playing up. Like, they're not shot in this glamorous way. There's a number of scenes where Olivia Holt has little, or at the very least very neutral makeup. They're not, it's not one of those. I did see a lot of hate, towards Olivia Holt that appears to be just people not being willing to give Disney kid stars a chance when they come of age, which is ridiculous. Like, I can't help but note this happens a lot to the women who started out as Disney kids, the Disney kids stars. I've seen a lot of people criticize Zendaya, and it's like, what are you talking about? She's amazing, And I've seen less people say it about Ryan Gosling, although, I don't know, now that he's played Ken in the Barbie movie, maybe there's probably going to be conservatives who absolutely hate him, especially the misogynistic ones, which is a quite substantial chunk of the conservative movement today. But they started on Disney, and I'm sorry, if you can post what you want in my comment section. If you post that you don't think Ryan Gosling has ever proven that he's talented, I really can't take your opinion seriously. Like, I'll have to assume you're trolling, which can be fun. And let's see. Very early in the show, they don't show the powers that much. They're not used all that much, and when they are, there's usually not very much in the way of visual effects, but what there is does, early on, doesn't look amazing. Maybe it's not the worst thing, and, it does help that Tandy's power can be shown by shining bright light, which is, of course, easy to do practically on set, inexpensively, and his power of teleportation can be handled through editing. It cuts to where he teleported to. He acts like he just teleported there. Over the course of the show, there gets to be more use of powers, and they reach a level of confidence. The characters in using them, the show in displaying them, and the effects get significantly better. The show has a lot of grit and credibility. It touches on some very important issues, including the opioid crisis, the perception of African-American youth as inherently dangerous and criminal. There are various aspects of organized crime and, problems that, Katrina is brought up, and they actually talk both about not the good of it, but the good that it revealed, the fact that people were actually able to recover. It's just remarkable, which, that is necessary when the president of the country doesn't know what to do and clearly isn't worthy of, the responsibility. Completely off topic, Donald Trump just got reelected. And the show confronts corrupt police, the power and influence of corporations, how the powerful can get away with doing evil. And there's some very compelling and mature themes over the course of it. Stuff like redemption. Are you who you are at your worst, or are you who you are when you're trying to make up for what you did when you were at your worst? Vigilantism. This is one of those, vigilante stories that actually explores, is vigilantism ever good? Does it go too far? Does it not go too far enough? I really appreciate, like, they actually do, they don't just show it. They actually have, there are characters on the show who, come right out and say, if you do that, that's vigilante, that's illegal. You'd be taking the law into your own hands, and someone else will be like, maybe we have to, maybe, and that is, like, it's a very logical place to go when the system does not take care of its people. And again, police brutality, Katrina, these are, it's pretty, it's the exact right place to ask these questions. And I personally think they do quite a good job of it. I wasn't really let down by any of the themes that they brought up, how the themes they chose, how they brought them up, how they explored them. And it gets into some very, very dark, mature subject matter. It uses the fact that, a bunch of the show is rated TV 14+, some of it is rated 16+. It gets much darker than the MCU movies. Okay, at this point, since technically Deadpool and Wolverine is an MCU movie, that is, thankfully we're getting more mature, more dark and adult there. But other than that, and certainly then it had, by the time the show, started airing, even by the time it ended airing, some of the Disney Plus MCU shows are also dark. Especially some of the last, I suppose there's a certain level of darkness to them right from the first we got. Anyway, now, let's see, then we have the show feels like they took a comic book and put it right on TV. I realize it's not a direct adaptation of the comics, some stuff was changed, but like many comics, it centers on two young people who are dealing with real-life problems as they get superpowers, try to master them, try to balance with the real life. Unlike earlier MCU shows, which has some of those same elements, but they aren't what's mainly focused on. I'm not saying those shows are bad. I really appreciate the variety. I'm just glad that at least one of these does do this very classic comic thing. It feels like, I haven't read Cloak and Dagger specifically, but it reminds me of, when I was a teenager reading X-Men and Spider-Man and such, teenagers with powers, but trying not to repeat myself. And let's see. I already mentioned somewhat, the superpowers are used much less than on earlier MCU shows. Probably at least partially a budget thing. The second season gets much better. I haven't been able to determine if it has a bigger budget or if they're just using the budget slightly differently, but definitely they're doing a better job in that one. Probably a budget thing. It didn't feel like it was just doing nothing in the interim other than not being quite as mature. This does feel somewhat like one of the Netflix Marvel shows, or Marvel Netflix shows. I can never remember how you're supposed to say that. And let's see, some people don't like that this is set in New Orleans, and I do appreciate that at least part of it might be the tax breaks, but it actually does use the setting incredibly well. Like, it really is about New Orleans. It gets into culturally specific things like the the voodoo, you know, let's see, did I not write? I might not have written. Okay, yeah. You know, it cleared up a lot of misunderstandings. You know, most of what I've heard about voodoo, like quite a few others here in the West, you know, white people in the West, it was said by, you know, conservative Christians who just wanted to make voodoo look terrible. And yeah, this show actually goes and you know, yeah, like, and they do it in a subtle enough way. There's one character, yeah, there's at least one character who knows a lot about voodoo, and at least one character who doesn't. So the former will explain to the latter, you know, stuff like how it's not actually in competition with Christianity, and it's not like trying to hurt people. That, you know, yeah, these are just myths. That, you know, yeah, conservative Christianity makes you extremely neurotic about other religions, and the propaganda that we've heard so much about, so much of about voodoo, is just yet another expression of that, you know. And I think that might just about cover. Yeah. The cinematography and editing are more daring here than the movies tend to be, and you know, it has been matched in some of the Disney Plus MCU shows, and it's certainly, like, Legion also has some really incredible, but you know, like, by and large, a lot of what we get on, you know, I've watched the first 5 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm watching all of these shows in the order that they originally aired, and I've watched all of The Gifted. You know, they have strong cinematography, for sure, but there's not necessarily quite as much where it gets really daring. Where here, like, yeah, you know, not as much as Legion, more than some of these others, and yeah, very impactful. And this is also a show that isn't afraid to dive into some very comic booky, you know, ideas. Again, not as far as Legion, but much further than other. You know, there are fights that take place. There's in a liminal space, and there are, you know. See, I don't want to get into too much. I don't want to spoil. I'll just say they do a couple of things that I really appreciated seeing in a comic book adaptation, because it's stuff I would have seen in a comic book. You know, both of the members of the titular duo can go into someone's mind. Cloak can see your worst fear. Dagger can see your greatest hope. And yeah, they do a fantastic job. Like, the hope stuff genuinely feel like it's giving, like, Hallmark card, you know, and it allows exploration of character. You know, you learn a lot about someone if you see their hope and or fear, and the fears feel like horror movie scenes. You know, they really don't hold back. They're not like, I don't know, might this be a little bit too intense for the teenagers? No, they're like, no, this, you signed up for this. This is what you get, you know. And yeah, absolutely loved it. Like, it reminded me of, like, maybe Twilight Zone kind of stuff, you know, really, really dark. And some of the fears, they have this diffuse quality to them. It's not like, oh no, I worry that this exact thing will happen that is quite literal. No, sometimes it is this just, like, vague thing where you're like, okay, I think I know what they're going for, and I'm kind of glad I'm not seeing it directly. And that might also be an age rating thing, but yeah, it's very effective. It's super effective. And I think that pretty much covers. Yeah, I think they do a really great job giving the various characters something to do. There were a couple of times where I was like, oh, is that the last we're gonna get on that character? And you know, no, they kept coming up with, like, I would pretty much say if a character isn't going to get something to do, they're probably just going to leave the show. They're not going to do that annoying thing where they just keep cutting back to the character. It's like, they're still here. We wrote a contract for them to be in this many episodes, and then we couldn't think of anything for them to do, so just enjoy them doing absolutely nothing. That never happens. Like, every time that a character pops up on this show that has any kind of like presence. You know, obviously it's not like every single, like there's some side characters that get very little, and obviously extras don't even, you know, enter into this conversation. But yeah, the major characters, if they pop up somewhere, they're going to get something to do or say that actually impacts things, you know. And yeah, it's a show where some of the characters aren't really fighters, but the writers come up with interesting other ways for them to help, and it's always in character. It's always something where you're like, that's something that character knows, cares about, that sort of thing, you know. It's kind of annoying when they're like, well, we got to give this character something to do. I don't know, have them throw a punch, and you're like, there's no way that, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, oh, we can't have women fighting. The action involving female characters on this show is great. No, you know, absolutely no, you know, nothing. Yeah, but there are some characters who are not really fighters, and instead of doing that thing where they just have them do something and you're like, there's no way that would work out that well, they come up with something. Yeah. And yeah, both seasons function as basically the first and second chapters. Like, you don't want to start with season 2, but yeah, you can, if you watch all of season 1 and you're thinking, I think I'm okay, that's enough of that, you're fine. It doesn't end on a cliffhanger. It resolves everything. Like, it sets up some stuff, and personally I thought they did a great job following up on it in season 2. Season 2, same thing. Doesn't end on a cliffhanger. There's some hints at stuff that might come, but they did conclude that entire chapter. You know, I would like to see more. It's possible that Disney Marvel is going to bring it back, bring some of the characters at least back in something, since stuff that used to be not quite canon and in a MCU adjacent show, you know, some of that has been made canon more recently. So it's possible, would love to see it, but if it never happens, I do feel like this was satisfying. You know, this is not one of those shows where, you know, it was canceled before it got to conclude the story that it was telling. You know, those are a lot harder to, yeah. It's harder to recommend a show like that. It's frustrating when it ends on such a cliffhanger. Now, and it's one of those things where if you don't, if you never do a cliffhanger in a season finale, it is going to limit somewhat what stories you can tell. I think they did a good job coming up with stories that were compelling, and I can deal with that later. Compelling and told well. I think, yeah, you don't need to know a single thing about, like, if every single comic book reference I've made in this video went over your head, you can still watch the show and follow it, no problem. It does not make a ton of reference. Like, I would definitely say, you know, there's some of these where if you don't know, you're gonna struggle to keep up, but this is not one of those, not at all. Yeah, I think that does cover everything. Yeah, I think they do a good job of having characters grow and develop over episodes. Some of them went to places I did not foresee based on earlier episodes, but it didn't feel like character assassination. And yeah, some, you know, good characters will go to dark places, and, you know, maybe at least one dark, you know, at least one evil character will go to a good place, you know. And yeah, it is definitely, you know, it is a show that gets to you, as it, not quite as much as some of the Netflix show, yeah, as the Netflix shows, you know, on account of the age rating and such. But, you know, it is not really something you just, but if you've had a long stressful day and you just want to, you know, decompress, this might not be the exact thing to put on as you know, activate the decompression sequence on the space shuttle. But yeah, really, really recommended. I rate it 8 superpower duos out of 10, and yeah, I really appreciate how much they did to make this distinct. You know, when I just heard that they, you know, oh, it's another teenage superhero show. Okay, so that's, not that Marvel live action has done a huge amount of those in recent years, but it's a pretty common, yeah. And no, it did not feel like they were just right. And yeah, I don't know. Have I already made it clear? There's definitely some comic purists who hate the show just because it's not one, because they changed some. I'll grant some of the changes are significant. I've read about what's in the comic. I think it was the exact right choice to make. Yeah, honestly, it's not really a spoiler to say. In the comics, there's this like modified heroine that's a really important part, and here, instead it's actually this industrial accident. And yeah, like the war on drugs was never about helping people. Go ahead, look it up. You don't have to take my word for it. And we do have to hold corporations accountable today. That's an extremely important thing. And I mean, we all know that drugs are bad, okay? It's not something that still needs to be said in media. It really isn't. And there's still way too many people who don't acknowledge that corporations are causing tremendous harm to us all, and that's something that you can actually do something about. Like, it's at this point fairly limited what a regular person can do to fight drugs, no matter how much, I hate drugs. I think they're terrible. The war on drugs is not how we deal with it, and telling young people, oh, be careful about drugs, is also not really that, but telling young people, this is what happens if you're not politically active. Corporations destroy all our lives as much as they at all can. That's something that can motivate. What, like a teenager, someone who's about to be old enough to vote, can only do so much personally about drugs. But yeah, vote to hold people accountable. And yeah, really, really love this show, and I think that does cover absolutely everything. So, yeah, I hope I've helped you figure out if you want to watch it or not, and yeah, gonna go rest my back. Wasn't originally planning on doing this video today, but I wanted to do it while, I watched the season 2 finale not too long ago. I just got done recording the thoughts. Right, that's if you are new to my videos, if you would like to hear what I have to say about individual episodes, I've recorded a video on every single episode. That the link to the script there. Wow. I thought I caught up on sleep. The link to the playlist of all of those episodes, videos, will be in the description box, and I'm going to stop recording now before I trip over my words